Hello and welcome to this video from the fourth unit of our course on fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. In the last video, we had identified the important concepts and doctrines relating to Articles 14 to 18 in the Constitution. In this unit, we will discuss Article 19. We will first introduce you to Article 19 and then take a deeper look at Article 19(1)(a), which guarantees the right to freedom of speech. You can learn about the other 5 freedoms in the second video of this unit.
Article 19 falls in Part 3 of the Constitution. Remember from our discussion in Unit 1 that this part contains the constitutional recognition of some inherent rights. Article 19, which is also in this part of the Constitution, protects some of these freedoms, including the freedom of speech. It guarantees 6 freedoms: the right to freedom of speech and expression, the right to assembly, the right to form associations, the right to movement, the right to residence, and the right to profession, occupation, or trade or business. You would have noticed that we skipped Article 19(1)(f). At one point in time, this clause had guaranteed the right to property. Following the decision in Kesavananda Bharati, which we discussed in the reading materials of Unit 1, and other decisions in the 70s relating to land reforms, this right was removed from Article 19 through a constitutional amendment in 1979.
When you read the complete text of Article 19, you will see that for each freedom, there is a corresponding clause that imposes reasonable restrictions on that freedom. The contents of these restrictions vary among the rights guaranteed.
Here, you can see the restrictions that can be imposed on Article 19(1)(a) to C. Similarly, 19(1)(d) to G are subject to reasonable restrictions contained in 19 Clause 5 and Clause 6. Article 19 is available only to citizens, unlike, for instance, Article 14 that guarantees the right to equality, which is available to any person.
Let us now take a closer look at the freedoms guaranteed under Article 19 Clause 1 and the restrictions on them under Articles 19 Clause 2 to Clause 6. Let us start with Article 19(1)(a).
Subclause A of Article 19 Clause 1, as we have just seen, guarantees the freedom of speech and expression to every citizen of India.
Speech and expression include the right to express one's convictions and opinions freely and includes the propagation of ideas as well. The expression could be in any form, including conversation, written works or print, or art forms, movie, or pictures. The freedom of expression is one of the basic values of the Constitution.
And you can see that it is even emphasized in its preamble. The freedom of thought and expression also includes the right to freely disseminate one's views and the right to criticize.
What about the press? There is no express protection of freedom of press in the Constitution. However, the freedom of press has been held to be an implicit part in Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution.
This follows from Romesh Thapar vs. State of Madras, an early case in India's constitutional history. While dealing with the case of pre-censorship of a journal in the state of Madras, the Supreme Court noted that the freedom of the press was implicit in the freedom of speech and expression. The court, while emphasizing the importance of the freedom of press, stated that an essential component of the freedom of press is to have the freedom to circulate, without which the propagation of ideas is impossible. It also highlighted that the freedom cannot be subject to unwarranted restrictions in the name of public safety and the maintenance of public order. The law declared in Romesh Thapar was later affirmed in Sakal Papers vs. Union of India. Here, the court was concerned with a government regulation placing restrictions on the number of pages of a newspaper and on the number of supplements a newspaper could publish. Newspapers have 2 aspects to their operations: the dissemination of news and views and the commercial aspect. While the former falls under 19(1)(a), the latter forms a part of Article 19(1)(g), the right to freedom to practice any trade or profession. The Supreme Court categorically stated that the freedom of press with regard to a newspaper includes the freedom of the newspaper to publish and circulate it to any number of persons. The state, by imposing restrictions on the business activities such as regulating the number of pages and supplements, was indirectly taking away the right of freedom of speech of citizens and hence violating the right guaranteed under Article 19, Clause 1. The Supreme Court has also struck down government policies restricting freedom of speech and expression.
Apart from the freedom of press, other rights have also been recognized under the right to freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a),
such as artistic expression, the right to produce or exhibit movies, and the right to educate and inform.
The right to information, that now stands recognized as an independent statutory right, had its origins as a right implicit in Article 19(1)(a).
The right to information is essential in a democracy. A vote is a form of expression, and the information necessary for voters to effectively express themselves is also a facet of the right to expression. Odd as it sounds, the right to speech and expression also includes a right to silence. In the 80s, the court upheld the right of certain religious denominations not to sing the national anthem on this ground.
In 2017, the Supreme Court had mandated that cinemas play the national anthem before every movie and later modified that order. Please note that even the earlier order of the court did not directly conflict with the right to silence, as that right is only in respect of choosing whether or not to sing the anthem. Okay, so now that we have seen the various forms of speech and expression that are protected under Article 19(1)(a), let us look at the restrictions that can be placed on that right under Article 19, Clause 2.
First, the concept of reasonable restrictions which can be imposed on speech and expression and other rights in Article 19 is not found in all constitutions. For instance, the right of free expression under the First Amendment to the US Constitution provides for an absolute right without any restrictions.
Under our Constitution, this right can be restricted in the exceptional circumstances provided in Article 19, Clause 2, provided these restrictions are reasonable. Let us read Article 19, Clause 2.
Interestingly, the clause did not, in its original form, refer to the grounds of friendly relations with foreign states and public order or the term reasonable. Article 19, Clause 2 was amended by the Constitution First Amendment Act 1951, following the decision in Romesh Thapar, which we discussed earlier, to permit the state to justify a range of actions limiting speech or expression,